Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the historic Wheeler Opera House. Please take a moment to silence your cell phones. Photography and video recording is allowed. Please refrain from using your flash. In the unlikely event of an emergency, take a moment to locate the exit nearest you. And now, give a warm Wheeler welcome to the renowned human-centered design studio, IDEO.org.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you. It's such an honor to be here with you today. I'm Haley Brewer from IDEO.org. We're a nonprofit design studio, and our mission is to design a more just and inclusive world. So we do that through designing everything from vision and strategies co-created with communities to really human-centered design of breakthrough products and services that can change people's lives. So I'm really pleased to be joined on the stage today to talk about our social contract and designing for social cohesion with some of my colleagues and the partners that we've worked with to design different things. And I'm gonna have them introduce themselves in just a moment. But before I do, I just wanted to share a quick story. When I was telling my family that I was coming here to speak with you all about the American social contract, my father-in-law just laughed. He laughed out loud. And then he said, "Do we even still have one of those?" And so I think my 7-year-old daughter sort of rolled her eyes and walked away. It was not a warm reception to the topic. And so their skepticism is warranted. And I know that they are not alone in feeling skeptical in this moment. We know that the news is full of reasons to feel grief and hopelessness and overwhelm, as well as urgency around this issue, maybe a sense of pessimism. But the thing is that design doesn't really deal in pessimism. Design is fundamentally an act of optimism, of not asking, what's the point, but asking, how might we? Where there is a will, there is a way. And design has a lot of mindsets and methodologies to move us from a state of hopelessness to a state of progress and moving forward. So that is the spirit in which we are here today to talk about this issue, and I invite you to join us in that practice of pragmatic optimism. I'm going to pass it to Ashley to introduce herself.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ashley Flores with the Child Poverty Action Lab based in Dallas, Texas.
Hi there, Dawn Legans. I'm the former head of strategy and innovation at Planned Parenthood of America, and I am the founder of LaserCat Labs and a board member at IDEO.org.
Hello, everyone. My name's Diane DaCosta, and I'm one of the partnerships leads at IDEO.org.
Hey guys, I'm Carmen Chadwick. I am from Rowlett, Texas. I work for Garland ISD and I work at Rowlett High School.
So we're going to dive in. I'm going to offer a little bit of upfront framing, and then these ladies are going to share some very specific case studies around how we're designing for social cohesion. So let's sort of ground ourselves in why this even matters. Many of you are probably familiar with the Surgeon General's warning on our epidemic of loneliness and isolation in this country. The numbers are quite staggering, both in terms of the level of isolation people are experiencing. I think something like most Americans have fewer than 5 close friends and limited daily interactions with folks who might be considered weaker ties, who are really important for our sense of connectivity. And this has major impacts on our health, both our physical health and our emotional health, with connections between your state of loneliness and the development of various diseases, from heart disease and diabetes to things like depression and anxiety. So this is a major sort of national issue that really links our degree of connectedness to our physical and mental health. Then there's this from the group Opportunity Insights, which is one of the leading groups really studying economic mobility in our country. So economic mobility is that concept. It's the American dream. It's the concept that children will do better than their parents were able to do, both financially and economically. And a few years ago, they came out with research that showed that the zip code in which you grow up has a major influence on the degree of economic mobility you will experience. And their most recent research shows that within zip codes, the degree of connectivity across classes is one of the greatest indicators of how much economic mobility will happen in that place. So our ability to connect across lines of difference, particularly across lines of class difference, has a huge impact for our shared prosperity. And then this work coming from Robert Putnam and one of his colleagues, he's a sociologist and has been long tracking sort of the degree of isolation and social cohesion in our country. I think he spoke in Aspen maybe 20 years ago on this same topic. And his latest research shows that social isolation or social cohesion, political polarization, and economic inequality all trend in the same direction. They sort of travel together. And they've been traveling in a direction towards increased economic inequality, increased political polarization, increased fragmentation for decades now. And his research shows that the thing that could help us turn the corner, that's the leading indicator, is our belief that we have something to do with each other, that we have a responsibility towards one another. And then following that, it's about our ability to act on that belief and connect, again, across lines of difference. This is called, in sociology, this is called bridging, or bridging social capital. And he admits here that this is an awkward place for him to land as a sociologist because it starts to tip over into issues of faith and morality. So these aren't folks trying to recruit you for a commune and join some beautiful community. These are physicians, these are economists, these are sociologists who are looking at the data and coming to a similar conclusion, which is that our belief in our ability to connect and care for each other, especially across lines of difference, especially in person, really undergirds our health and longevity, disaster recovery and resilience, political stability, and economic mobility. All very desirable things. Put another way, we're not going to get the things that we want unless we address this issue and put some energy into it. It's a moral issue, it's an existential issue, it is also a designable issue. It's something we can do something about. So how might we design for social cohesion? When I have previously thought about this issue, my mind goes towards infrastructure, public parks, how we develop neighborhoods, some of the policies and things in that space. And at the other end of the spectrum, sort of personal behaviors and patterns and how social you are. And I don't know about you, but I'm not a city planner and I'm not an architect, so that zone is a little bit difficult to engage with. And on the other end, I'm a profound introvert, and so the level of impact that I can have personally through that space is going to be a little bit limited, while I will try. So today I'm actually interested in this middle zone of things that all of us actually have some responsibility for designing in our work, whether that work is paid or unpaid. The stories that we're telling about our communities and about the future, the products and services that we are making and selling, as well as the ones that we are using, and then also how we think about time and use time, especially time when we cross paths with other people. So for each of these, I'm going to talk a little bit about a shift in design in thinking that can help us design in these spaces towards social cohesion. So the examples that you're going to see are not super literal, they're more like analogous, so just keep that in mind as we go through. So this is the last house standing on Mexico Beach in Florida after Hurricane Michael swept through several years ago. And while it is an incredible feat of architecture, it was purposefully designed to withstand the big one. If you look beyond it, the community is utterly destroyed and decimated. It's been flattened. And I share this not to throw shade on the folks who designed and architected that house. It's important that we keep doing that work. But to call attention to this as symbolic of a narrative that we often turn to as we're thinking about the future and telling stories of the future, which is the story of the survival of the fittest. And something that's sort of operating in the background a lot these days is this idea that the future will be won by those who can get to high ground before the tsunamis of AI and climate change flood the world as we know it. So I don't know if you feel this when you hear that or pick up hints of it in things that you're reading or consuming or the ways that folks are communicating about the future, but that makes me anxious. It also makes me want to hoard resources and like find a way to build a bunker, right? It sends you in a certain kind of direction. It's shaping our imagination about the future and how we should prepare for that future. And the issue is that while that narrative is very deeply rooted in our national mythology, it obscures important truths about evolution and how we adapt and how we survive, which is that evolution is not just about competition, it is just as much about our level of coordination and connection and cooperation. It's about strategic generosity. It is about our strength as a group, as a community. So there's a different type of story that we can be telling about the future that can help activate everyone's imagination in a slightly different direction that gets away from the hoarding and barricading ourselves apart from each other towards building those connections. So this is a photojournalism essay from New York Times journalist Simbarache Che. He does a lot of fashion and street photography coverage. And this was coverage of the East London flower market from last year. And he sort of takes this beautiful anthropological approach where he notices all of these really interesting patterns within this group. So people who are buying flowers that somehow echo the things that they're wearing or their hair, folks who are paying homage to flowers in different ways through the things that they're wearing, different floral motifs. He noticed how many friend groups were there and how diverse the community was that were gathered there that day. I think what's important and what I love about this is that it's a different way of telling a story about community. Oftentimes the visual portrayals of community that we see are groups of people, matching t-shirts, all smiling, thumbs up, that sort of obscure the individual differences in that group. And that can be something that turns us away from turning towards community if we feel like we have to sacrifice our identity to belong. This instead says everybody here belongs. We're merging those lines of connection. There's something joyful and loving and beautiful and wild and unruly and yet utterly cohesive about the way that he captured this gathering of people. It feels almost like looking at a field of wildflowers, if you imagine, and the associations with that level of resilience of coming back year after year, no matter what. So as we're telling stories, instead of leaning on the template of survival of the fittest and leaning into that, reiterating that, activating that in people's imagination, the encouragement here is to surface those stories of indomitable communities and to let the story emerge by paying close attention to what people share in common. What are those things that weave that community together? So let's talk about products and services. In her book, The Sum of Us, Heather McGhee recounts the story of drained swimming pools. So in the early 20th century, there were major public investments in public swimming pools, in part as a response to the lack of social infrastructure to support positive youth development. But these were a major asset in white middle-class communities and also helped scores of immigrants sort of successfully build their networks and integrate into those communities. But when the civil rights movement came along and desegregation came along, many of those same white communities chose to drain their community pools rather than share them with Black children and families. And Heather McGhee traces this kind of zero-sum thinking to the divestments that we're seeing in our social safety net today. So why am I sharing this? I'm sharing this because if we look around in our country, a lot of the products and services that we consider to be the best functionally serve to separate us from each other, to separate us from the masses. The rewards for all of our hard work and good fortune are to stand apart in separate neighborhoods or cities, in separate insurance plans, separate schools, and private transportation even. And those are design choices. That's coming from a certain kind of design ethos that equates quality with separateness, with eliteness. But that doesn't have to be the way it is. What if the things that we're most proud of, the most iconic examples of American design, instead helped us build stronger ties with each other, turned us towards each other? We can take some inspiration from the Scandinavian modernism movement, which emerged between the world wars as a response to the need to really rebuild economies and cultures. And in addition to an ethos and some principles around organic forms and natural materials, one of the core ideas behind this design movement was democratic design. So the idea that there were a set of universal needs and that those universal needs could be met through beautiful, functional design that everyone could afford and participate in, that the best design didn't belong only in the homes of the wealthy. Everyone should be able to enjoy it. Southwest Airlines used to be a good example of democratic design in the United States until recently. I think they've changed their policies. So when we have choices to shape products and services, instead of sort of going into that modality of like, oh, what's the good, better, best? What's this sort of separate thing that we can create, the cream of the crop? What would it look like to instead turn towards democratic design? By the way, I think this conference is a great example of democratic design. Sure, it's in Aspen, but the accessibility and that ethos behind this is absolutely what I'm talking about here. And then this final example is really around time and how we choose to use time. So it's largely a cultural construct, how we structure and use time. The 40-hour work week stemmed from research that Henry Ford commissioned around the point of diminishing returns in terms of worker productivity. The resulting 9-to-5 workday for office work, if you think about the structure of an 8 to 3 p.m. school day and sort of the disconnect between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. and the implications for our relationships. Communities of faith have dedicated days for fasting and for rest together. These are all sort of design choices that we make. And in the United States, the sort of driving concept between the way that we organize time is that time is money. It should be maximized for individual, personal productivity in an economic sense, and that minutes really matter. I'm sure all of us have spent time trying to think about time hacking and how you can be really efficient with your time. The thing is that this ethos can mean that we overlook the value of time in terms of building social capital. And I don't mean the kind of social capital that you build at a conference and you hope to turn into financial capital down the line. I mean social capital for the sake of it. And I'll give an example that's going to seem meandering, but I promise it will loop back. I was at the grocery store last week. I live in a small mountain town in California. And I brought my 7-year-old daughter, and she had convinced me earlier in the day to buy this like mini hula hoop thing. She had that with her, and she was kind of fiddling with it by the checkout. And one of the cashiers saw that and came out from behind her station and offered to teach her a trick. And she taught her this really cool isolation trick. And it turns out, my daughter was absolutely delighted. And it turns out that this person has a background as a circus prop preparer and can do things like stand on her head and like do a hula hoop on her foot or something crazy. So we had a laugh about that. But the thing is that little interaction was totally serendipitous, absolutely joyful, like cast a glow over the rest of the day. And we both walked away from it being more human to each other. She wasn't just a cashier. I wasn't just a customer. There's a backstory. There are different dimensions there. And it took maybe 90 seconds, that whole interaction. And I will continue going back to that grocery store, even though there are other ones, because it's a place that takes the time to see people. And I appreciate that. That's not something that would have happened if I had been in a grocery store where, self-checkout would have been the more efficient or quick thing to do, or if I had ordered groceries online that day. So this may seem minuscule, right, and microscopic, but the thing is that these weak ties, these small connections, especially across lines of class difference, can really add up over time. In Fitzgerald, a community where Reimagining the Civic Commons, this group, has been making a concerted effort to develop public spaces and programming at the intersection of socioeconomic neighborhoods. They've been looking at and tracking the impact on a bunch of things, but one of the things is trust. And in this community, since the implementation of this space and programming, they've seen a major uptick in the level at which people trust each other as neighbors and their trust for local government. Over 3 years, I think it went from 13% to 37%. So it is possible to move the needle through small micro interactions that are intentionally designed. So instead of continuing to aim towards making things frictionless in service of personal productivity or individual productivity, let's leave a little friction in. Let's be intentional about where we are creating moments that spark connection, that have that element of serendipity to see what unfolds. So the point is, we all have some design power to shape stories or the products and services we're making or consuming. We all have choices that we're making around how we use time, and I'm just encouraging you all, as well as us, to use that power well. After this, I'm going to be followed by lightning talks by my colleagues here, first with Ashley, so I'm going to turn it over to her. But please keep in touch. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Ashley Flores, and I'm with the Child Poverty Action Lab, or CPAL for short. We are a Dallas-based nonprofit organization committed to cutting child poverty in half within a generation. We integrate data and design into a series of social issues that we call our 5 big bets for economic mobility. At CPAL, we believe that complexity is the enemy of scale. So we work to take big, gnarly problems and break them down into their component parts. We then tackle one piece at a time until we see outcomes move at scale. We also believe that too often, data is used to simply admire a problem. So we use data to point to solutions instead. Haley challenged us to think about the role of designers in social cohesion. How might we activate design for social cohesion and belonging in our communities? Given CPAL's focus on data and design, I have to offer a slight tweak to the frame. I'll challenge us to think about what might be the role of data, design, and designers, and how might data help us cast a vision for social cohesion. I mentioned that CPAL works across 5 big bets for economic mobility. I lead one of those big bets, housing. I'm biased, of course, but I believe that housing is a compelling illustration for how data can point to solutions at scale and also enable the conditions for social cohesion. So let's take a look at 3 data stories on how that might be so. The Housing Choice Voucher Program, if you're unfamiliar, is a federal subsidy for very low-income renters to access housing, rental housing, on the private market. The voucher household pays a portion of the rent based on their income, and then the voucher pays the balance of the rent. The promise of the voucher is twofold: affordable rent and also greater access in the private rental market. In Dallas County, where I live and work, we have over 18,000 households with vouchers, and this map shows you where they live. The area shaded in darker green is where there are more households with vouchers. The areas shaded in the lighter green are where there are fewer vouchers. The areas shaded white are where there are no voucher households. If you're unfamiliar with Dallas, I'll say this. Dallas follows a familiar pattern that we see in cities and counties across the country. That is to say, the northern half of the county is generally more affluent, home to more white residents, and home to more resource-rich communities compared to the southern half of the county. On any number of social indicators, household income, educational attainment, health, we see drastic differences between residents who live north of I-30 and those who live south of I-30. So what we see on this map is that voucher holders are disproportionately concentrated in the southern half of the county in predominantly low-income census tracts. I mentioned before that the promise of the voucher is twofold: affordable rent and greater access in the private rental market. But for voucher holders in Dallas, access to high opportunity neighborhoods, which we define here as census tracts with household income greater than the county overall, is severely limited. By and large, voucher households are shut out of resource-rich communities with access to good schools, jobs, transits, and all the other amenities that families need to thrive. Why does this matter? This matters because access to high opportunity neighborhoods makes a tremendous difference, particularly for kids, when we look at their long-term prospects and chances for upward economic mobility. In a groundbreaking Raj Chetty study, he found that households with children in them with vouchers who were able to move from a high poverty neighborhood to a low poverty neighborhood, those children stand to gain an additional $302,000 in lifetime earnings simply by virtue of moving to a high opportunity neighborhood. So those resource-rich communities, they matter. They matter a lot for kids. Okay, so what if Dallas County households with children could, in fact, access those high opportunity neighborhoods? Among those 18,000 or so voucher households in Dallas County, about 7,000 are households with children. When we look at our high opportunity census tracts, there are around 1,400 apartment complexes scattered across them. Each apartment complex would need to take just 5 vouchers to evenly distribute all of our households with vouchers and kids in high opportunity neighborhoods. If we assume just 1 child in each of those voucher households, we stand to realize a collective benefit of $91 billion in future earnings just because those kids were able to access a high opportunity neighborhood. If we consider the population of all voucher households in Dallas County, regardless of if there is a child or not in the household, we would go from a map that looks like this, where voucher holders live today, to a map that looks like this, where voucher holders are able to access neighborhoods that are rich in resources. Let's think about another aspect of housing. In the city of Dallas, we are short around 40,000 affordable rental units for households earning at or below 50% area median income, which is around $49,000 for a family of 4. DFW often leads the nation in multifamily construction, but we struggle to deliver affordable units for our very low-income renters. Development deals for very low-income renters are difficult to make pencil, and in a climate of increasing interest rates and construction costs, they seem near impossible. So what if we look to untapped and maybe untraditional resources to help us close the supply gap in our rental housing market? Let's think about faith-based institutions, churches, synagogues, mosques, faith-based nonprofits. They are nationally increasingly asset-rich but cash-poor. So at CPAL, we looked at Dallas County and we looked at the vacant parcels that were owned by faith-based entities. We found around 2,200 vacant parcels across the county owned by faith-based entities. Among those, there are 845 vacant parcels that are already zoned for a residential use. This translates to about 16 million square feet of, in theory, developable land for affordable housing. In Texas, we can't resist a good football metaphor, so that 16 million square feet translates to roughly 284 football fields, vacant football fields waiting for housing. We did kind of a back of the napkin equation, and if we applied gentle density to those vacant lots, we believe we could yield an additional 39,000 affordable rental units, which would effectively wipe out the gap that I mentioned earlier, if only we could tap into an unusual and untraditional resource. The last data story I'll tell is related to eviction filings. In Dallas County last year, there were over 50,000 evictions filed by landlords. The vast majority were for non-payment of rent, for renters who didn't quite make a rent payment, fell behind. We know that eviction disproportionately impacts young kids. For kids who experience an eviction, they go on to face academic challenges, long-term physical and mental health challenges. They have greater food insecurity and greater exposure to environmental hazards. Eviction for kids and their families is detrimental. So when we take a closer look at eviction filing patterns in Dallas County, we see kind of an interesting story. What you're looking at here is a time series plot of total evictions filed by year from 2017 through 2024. And we had a kind of an unplanned experiment of sorts in 2020 and 2021 when the pandemic hit. In 2020 and 2021, unprecedented renter protections and tens of millions of dollars in federal rent relief suppressed eviction filing activity. You can see a drastic dip in 2020 and 2021, but then unfortunately, when those renter protections expired, when rent relief dried up, we returned to business as usual. In fact, in 2024, we posted our highest one-year total on record in terms of eviction filing activity. But what the pandemic proved was that when you can support renters Upstream, when you can get them rent relief, they can stabilize and stay in their homes, and landlords and property owners can meet their obligations as well. But when that federal rent relief dried up, we didn't sustain it. We didn't find a local source to keep it going. So what if we could help renters upstream with rent relief and avoid eviction altogether? What if we could keep renter households stable and secure in their communities? When we look at the 2024 data, we found that about a quarter of all eviction filings were for less than $1,500, so around about 1 month's rent or less. That cumulative total of rent owed for that quarter of eviction filings was just $14 million. The Dallas County budget is $1.7 billion annually. $14 million is less than 1%. Imagine if we could dedicate the resources to support renters upstream and keep them housed and ensure that landlords get what they need as well. We would avoid a number of downstream consequences like homelessness, job loss, and more. So I hope through these 3 data stories, I've made the case that data alongside design can be a really compelling tool to help us cast a vision for social cohesion, especially through housing. Data can help us tell a different story, a more optimistic story, can help us paint a new picture for what's possible. So with that, I will turn it over to Dawn. Thank you.
I think she made data sexy and inspiring. So as Haley said, I'm Dawn Legans, hi. As Haley said at the beginning, there are a number of design ingredients that can help with social cohesion. And one of them are products and services that we make and that we use. And I'm here today to tell you a story about one that really sucks. And what I think we could start to do to maybe fix it. So right now in Texas, there's a guy who is suing a California doctor for sending the guy's girlfriend abortion pills. Everybody following me so far? She asked for the abortion pills. He didn't just send them. The man found out about them by spying on her Venmo. Whoops, not thank you, not that one, this one. So now an app that we use to share, dinner expenses and Uber rides is being used as the exhibit A in a court case against a health professional. Now, you're like, okay, I'm really not following. I thought this was going to be about something else. It is not a story about reproductive rights, although it feels to me that many things are today. What it is a story about is design failure. Because when anyone hesitates to make a purchase or worries after the fact, who's going to see it, who's going to judge it, and who's going to use it against them, that's a design failure. That's a break in trust. And what I'm seeing as I've looked at this more and more closely is that basically payment software and architecture is essentially spyware with a better user interface. That's right. Payments, one of our truly most mundane activities that most of us do every day along the way, are fraying the fabric of trust in institutions, in systems, and among individuals. And that's because they're strip mining our entire lives for data that can be packaged and sold and increasingly weaponized. So when, whether it's Venmo or PayPal or every Stripe swipe, we are seeing that we are creating things that are really more detailed than an FBI report, right? Who you sleeping with? What are you smoking? Who you giving money to? All of those kind of things are being collected and then being monetized, and it is hugely, hugely profitable. I would also say it's like the ad for diamonds. Payments are forever. Those trails, those payment trails never leave and can always be looked at, subpoenaed, all that kind of stuff. But when every bit of transaction becomes a potential bit of evidence, helping a friend, supporting your family, making a donation, community becomes dangerous and connection can become a liability. I look at it as we thought we were designing for convenience, and we ended up building mass surveillance. And I can tell you that surveillance and cohesion, they don't play very well together, right? They don't help build societies of care and love and concern. And it's not really that hard to design for privacy. Boy, I'm so bad at this because I like to talk with my hands. But profit and paranoia are really pushing in the opposite direction of privacy and community. Profit drives communities to kind of strip search every transaction for information that they can package and sell. Paranoia, fear of fraud, fear of immigrants, fear of dissent drives that demand for surveillance. And while convenience, which is a great selling point and why most of us love it, control always ends up seeming to be the bottom line. Now, of course, they tell us this is just how it has to be, people. If you want that convenience, you're just going to have to roll with it. I'm going to call BS on that. Those are business models. They're not laws of physics, and they're not the limits of technology. Think about cash, right? I give somebody $20, it's immediate, it's private, it's final, there's no permissions, there's no permanent records, nobody's taking a cut. But cash works because it's designed for humans, not hedge funds, right? And we haven't banned cash because sometimes bad people use it. So what if we designed payment processes that centered the very people that we care about rather than selling them out? I believe it would create a beautiful, beautiful paradox that when financial surveillance was reduced, people will be more open and more connected to each other. The mom who's working overseas can send that vital money home to her family without worrying about being tracked and targeted by ICE. A patient will be able to safely and securely pay for mental health services, hormone replacement therapy, Plan B, without creating receipts that some politically motivated, overzealous prosecutor might use against them. And folks will feel solid donating to hunger relief or abortion funds or mutual aid without ending up on some government watch list. And I spend a lot of time in DC, and that's a real thing these days. It's also, this isn't a fantasy vision. The technology to keep our transactions both secure and private really already exists. We have in Africa, M-Pesa, in Kenya, where you can send through SMS money without even revealing your phone number. In Estonia, there are apps that verify your insurance without leaking your medical information and other personal data. In Western Massachusetts, there are community currencies like one called Berkshares that's keeping money local and private in 300 local businesses even today. Plus, we got a lot of new tools, right? Zero knowledge proofs, open banking, crypto wallets, keep them going, all the encrypted computing, everything we need to build payments that don't treat users like products. So the question really isn't, can we build a privacy-first payment system? It's will we demand it? Right now, our payment system is like a panopticon. That's the prison where the guards can see every one of the inmates, but the inmates never know when they're being observed. We're living in a digital panopticon where every transaction is viewed, reviewed, and recorded. Every payment is somehow a submission to the system. But today we understand that tech companies lie, that tech privacy is really tech theater, and convenience is coming at an increasingly high price. So I would say we must design differently. Every interface, every user flow, every default setting, it's not just software. It's actually social architecture. Designers know architecture shapes behavior. We give prizes for bridges that connect us, and we give prizes for big, beautiful spaces that inspire us. But the invisible architecture, like the payment system that shapes how we live and love and care for each other, it goes unnoticed, uncelebrated, and unreformed. Financial systems are social architecture. If we design them for human connection and human community with privacy as the default, users in control of their data, communities able to own the financial tools that drive them, then the architecture of payments can be the architecture of trust, and we can have a payment system that does not suck. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name's Diane DaCosta. I'm a partnerships lead at IDEO.org, and I'm joined here with
Carmen Chadwick.
And I'm going to start things off with the voices of the students and teachers that made this work sing.
Students, teachers, district leaders, designers, and education advocates came together to reimagine student accountability in 4 schools in Garland, Texas.
Don't hold my hand because then it's babying me. But support me enough to where I can walk on my own, but I won't fall.
Schools are the heart of our communities. When our students and teachers thrive, then families thrive, and then whole neighborhoods can thrive too. But when they struggle, we all feel it. Students who have a trusting relationship with an adult in their building are more likely to show up, to grow, to learn.
When students believe that we believe in them, they'll jump over the moon for us. You know, they'll give their maximum effort.
Today, our schools are built for efficiency. There's no time to check in, no space to slow down. The kids are not okay, and neither are the teachers.
I need something like this that I can just refer to in my pocket. I don't need a Venn diagram with this and this and this. Did you call mama? Did you call daddy? Did you email this? Did you do? That's not going to help me in the moment.
As we collaborated with teachers, we tried to understand how to make it easier to build those relationships and how we can keep incidents from happening in the first place. We realized that there's a lot of ingenuity and creativity within schools already, like Miss Carmen, who fundraised from church to create a recharge room for her students.
There was no funding for it. I just went on my Facebook page and said, hey, I got this crazy idea. And the community rallied around me.
Or Mr. Parker, who picked up drumming to help kids blow off steam and reduce the tensions during transitions.
Some of the kids have picked up on the fact that once I started to play fast, we was getting closer to the second class. So with that said, we cleared the hallways and kind of cut down on some of the tardies.
Rather than putting the problem away, teachers are giving students the mindsets to face their challenges and learn from their mistakes. The tools we built alongside teachers amplify their expertise and support learning in their classrooms.
It was just exciting. It's an exciting opportunity to start with the voices of teachers and to help teachers grow that, to see them valued.
That first group of teachers, how they were implementing the tools and they had less write-ups in the system. You can still use these tools to create accountability and still love on them.
I've seen a lot less arguing, fighting. The kids are getting along better with each other, as well as me and the other coach in there.
Since we launched these solutions, over 60 teachers, counselors, and building principals across 4 schools are using the tools with their students. They're creating a movement to redefine school culture. Try the tools with your students and join the movement.
This project is, absolutely. This project is so near and dear to my heart. As a former teacher and as someone who spends a lot of time with young people, that's where we learn the skills of how to be in community with one another. And the schools are hearts of our community. When they struggle, we feel it. It's something that is felt from students, teachers, parents, community members. Schools are the hearts of our community, and when they struggle, so do we. Returning from the pandemic, there was a common problem. Young people were really struggling to be in community with one another. After spending years or long months at their house, learning on their own, just being in the room with their peers was challenging. And the behavior incidents were off the chain. Those are the words from my teacher co-designers. But our status quo is to exclude, to send students out of class, suspension, expulsion, and even removal from their school community. But that doesn't work. In fact, it causes a lot of harm. Not only do we remove students from their classrooms where they're learning, they actually don't get to learn about what did I do wrong and how might I repair my behavior so that I could actually continue to be learning with my peers in a classroom. We felt this with teacher burnout. Lots of teachers were struggling to deal with student behavior, and it wasn't just one community or one demographic or one state or region. It was a national problem where teachers across the country were burnt out, not just from returning to school, but struggling to deal with student behavior. But everyone has a role to play in supporting our communities, and that's where we did something a little bit differently. What we did with this project of building school culture champions, we elevated the voices of those who knew what was best, the teachers themselves. We co-designed with teachers, students, community members, administrators to say, there are folks in school buildings who hold students accountable and actually provide the learning opportunities that help them make different choices in the future. We started by design research, immersing ourselves in the environments where the teachers who are experts at doing this were already deploying strategies on their own. From there, we surfaced those insights of how might we build a different system. Suspension and expulsion were just the easy access point. It's the system that we have, so what might we do to build something different instead? Those insights from our teacher co-designers became the roots of what we built together, some prototypes that were low-lift interventions to address student behavior, build community, and design back in those moments for connection. We started with a very small group of teacher co-designers, Ms. Chadwick being one of them, and then we had those teachers become the advocates of the tools they built themselves. They invited their colleagues in their school communities to try the tools out in their classrooms. We had folks who were teaching 6th grade math and folks who were teaching high school dance use the same tools and prototype them in their different contexts. What we built was true ownership of the tools that we created. And then we piloted the solutions. In 4 schools, we had our teacher co-designers running with the prototypes that they created and seeing the impact on their students and in their school campuses. What did we build? What we created were a set of tools and approaches that sit in these 4 different buckets. How do we set expectations from the very beginning so that teachers and students alike understand what is that social contract that we're opting into? Sometimes when our social contract is not spoken or named, folks have different interpretations of what it is that's expected in the space. Making that explicit and creating shared ownership where students and teachers co-create that together, there was a shared understanding to prevent incidents from happening in the first place. Then we had opportunities to connect before things escalate. A mood meter to check in, am I having a bad day? Am I having a great day? But before a teacher provides a correction to a student, having that baseline understanding of is it a good day or a bad day can help prevent a student from throwing a chair across the room. And then understanding that our teachers are holding a lot. We are asking teachers to hold the burdens that students walk in with every day. And pouring into our teachers was really essential. And also giving them the opportunities to shout out the positive behaviors that they're seeing amongst their peers so that they can have an adult professional environment where they're lifting each other up rather than being bogged down. And then calling in our community support. Often we saw that schools and communities were sometimes adversarial. There was distrust with the community to be able to have the school operate the way that it should. Or the school was struggling for the community to see the challenges that they were experiencing every day. But what we asked is how might we invite in our community members to be allies in this challenge of supporting our students? Together, we created a set of tools and resources that kept students on track of staying in the classroom rather than this path of exclusionary discipline where they're sent further and further from their peers and their school communities. The interventions are designed to proactively build that social contract, the connection, the empathy, the understanding, and allow for learning opportunities to understand, hey, what I did wasn't cool, next time let me do something different, rather than just being sent out of class and then brought back in without any opportunity to really learn. And the design principles that we kept really near and dear were making sure that we were elevating teacher expertise. So often we design for, not with, those who know best. And something that really inspired me from this project was hearing teachers say, I felt valued as a professional. Never in a professional development have I been asked what my perspective is. I'm just told to contort to this cookie cutter expectation of a new deliverable or the new curriculum that I'm supposed to deliver. Here we said, teachers, y'all know what works best. How do we surface your expertise and create a new system from there? Building ownership, shared ownership amongst teachers, students, community members. It's a team sport, y'all. The kids will try us. So what does it look like to be in partnership and do it together? Also, prioritizing relationships. Y'all have heard it, the learning loss, the way that folks are behind, so much being asked to do in such a small amount of time. By designing for lots of curriculum and content, we unintentionally designed out those moments of connection, humanity, rest, reset. And so how might we create the opportunities to redesign those moments? And then make it your own. We know that what works for one teacher and what works for another teacher are very different. So how do we give folks tools that they can adapt and iterate to work in a context that works for them? That way they can actually use the tools at their disposal. Our theory of change is simple. It's a team sport. We need everyone in order to make that change for our students and for our communities. And so the tools themselves equip folks across the ecosystem, at the district level, in the community, teachers and students themselves, to take these tools and build the connections that'll allow them to be successful. And now I can't wait for you to hear a little bit more about those stories of what it's done for our students.
Wow. To hear Diane share what happened, it is so surreal. She took 18 months and just compacted it, about 3 or 4 minutes there. But the impact that it had, I just hope I can give you a glimpse. She kind of shared in theory what the system-wide approach to discipline was, but I hope I can give you a really genuine glimpse into our campus and the shift that it made by sharing a few of our stories and our students. So like I said, I'm Ms. Chadwick. I work at Rowlett High School. We have about 2,300 students on our campus. We're a Title I district, so we have a lot of needs on our campus. So I just want to talk about the impact of 2 of the tools, one, the culture card, and the community mentor program. So I'm going to start with Marcus. So I want you to envision Marcus. Marcus is a 10th grader, and he's been on every list that they can be on, a student can be on. So he is that student that the teacher looks at the beginning of the year and prays that he is not on their roster. Please do not let this student be on my roster. He's the student that is always in the hall, out of class, in the office, sitting in referrals. You just run when you see him. He's volatile, right? With good reason. With good reason. But teachers have so much on their plates that they can't see the good reasons. They can't see beyond the outburst or the bad attitude, right? They just don't have time to see through it. So, by no surprise, Marcus has a big outburst in class. But this teacher has been training on how to use the repair card, one of the culture cards, a repair card. And so she asked Marcus to step out with her in the hall. Typical routine when a child has an outburst. But instead of berating him for the outburst in private, because it's better if you do it that way, you know, she does some repair work with Marcus. She names the harm, she rebuilds some trust, and she puts a plan forward for in the future if it occurs again. So instead of writing the referral, suspending him for 3 days, where he's out of instruction, set back in his academic learning, which would have happened in the old system, she restored that relationship. And fast forward a few weeks, all of a sudden, Marcus and this teacher, they have a rapport. They have a relationship. And now, that teacher is his safe place to land. Now I hear this teacher telling other teachers, hey, he's not so bad if you just get to know him a little bit. He's got a real story, you know. That's the power of repair and community versus punishment with no repair. The other things teachers will say, it takes too much time to do the restorative work. The teacher said to me, my biggest fear is I don't have time to do that work. But she said it would have taken me more time to go to my computer, write the referral, call the parent, than that 5-minute conference I had with him in the hall to restore the repair. We have to do better, right? So that was the power of this one little card, this tool. It wasn't about the card, y'all. Sorry, my Texas comes out when I get passionate. It was about the connection. It didn't really change the students' behavior. If you notice, it was the adults' behavior that changed, right? It's powerful. Student number 2. This is profound to me. I think the biggest fear that we had to overcome. I knew we couldn't make real change on our campus until we invited our community in. There's such a mistrust between our high school kids and our community. I'm sorry, I went out from behind this podium. There's such a mistrust between community and high school kids. They don't trust the adults in this world, and our adults don't trust them either. I'm just telling you, there's mistrust. It has to be fixed. It's very broken. And so I wanted our community to come in. Until we heal that, we can't do anything. That has to be fixed. And so I said, let's invite them in. Let's let them work with our kids. So we did. We built this program. And everybody feared it, but it's been the most impactful. So if you'll see on our screen, this right here is Samuel, the student, and this is Kenna, one of our community mentors. Kenna's 72, grandpa who loves to bake cookies. Samuel came to us. He was referred for the mentor program because he was failing, first cycle, 10th grade student, failing 5 of his 8 core classes, okay, 5. First cycle. By the end, after just meeting with Mr. Kenna, the first cycle, they met once a week, 30 minutes in our reset room. They talked about anything and everything. They built community, y'all. After the first cycle, by the end of second cycle, he restored every failing grade to a 70. We have an opportunity for students to do that. And he was on AB honor roll for second cycle. This is the most beautiful part of this story. He told his dad, he had the courage to tell his dad, I don't want to play football. That was courage in Texas, y'all. Courage. He said, I want to be a pastry chef. Now Samuel sits at our Career and Tech Center and is on his journey to becoming a pastry chef. Can you believe that? That's the power of design when we center relationships. So these may seem like small moments, but together they have led to a reduction in our suspensions of our district for 36% reduction rate. And on our campus in particular, we've seen in-school and out-of-school suspension reduced to 70%. So we feel the difference in that in a big way. In our culture, it's different on our campus, but academically, we feel it in a big way. Our results are improving in our state exam scores, on our local district scores. The kids feel like they belong there. And they're more than just a number or a data point. They matter to us. So when we we have found when we transform that school culture and we transform our families and our communities, then everybody wins, right? It's not just about teaching math and English. It's about teaching these kids that they matter and that they have a voice. We just have to teach them how to use it. They don't even know how to be heard. They don't know how to be heard. So in this case, design wasn't just about solving problems. It was about shifting the power, repairing the relationships, and making our schools the heart of our sorry. I'm so sorry, y'all, but it was so impactful. It was about making our schools the heart, my school, the heart of my community again. Thank you, IDEO, for doing that for us. Sorry, I almost did it. It's so good.
When we transform our schools, we transform our communities. But it's not just about our schools. It's about our payment systems. It's about housing. And it's about creating the opportunities to design together for that social cohesion. The small design choices where we can create those opportunities. So I would invite you to come hang out with us at the gallery. We're so excited to continue the conversation. But thank you so much for listening to how we're designing for that social cohesion.